This is the third of the Fiducia recorded webinars looking at how DLT technology can solve some of the core challenges of the industry. In particular, the issues highlighted by the PwC report around transparency in the programmatic supply chain. There's no doubt that the need for all parties to understand where their money goes is paramount, and the desire for a technology solution is greater than ever. To help me discuss this subject, I have with me today Richard Brown, CTO at R3. He spent 15 years at IBM working as a technical lead focusing on banking and financial markets. He is now CTO at R3, where he leads the team building Corda, the world's most advanced enterprise blockchain platform. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you. Hi, Nick. Thanks for having me.
So for people who are in marketing and may not have heard of R3 or Corda, can you give us a sort of brief overview of the platform and technology and where it sits in the market?
Yeah, sure. So perhaps the first thing to hear about is that R3 wasn't founded as a software company. That's what we now are. We're a software company selling our blockchain platform Corda to firms and industry groups across the world. But we began far more narrowly. We began as a consortium of dozens and dozens of the world's largest banks, and this was back in 2015. And the thing, I guess, to realize is what the world was like back then in I guess what we call the blockchain space. Back then, what people were looking at were things like Bitcoin, the nascent Ethereum platform, cryptocurrencies, speculation, the new economy that was being built. And there was an emerging feeling led by me, amongst others, there were many people saying this, that perhaps this technology that's currently being used to create new virtual currencies and cryptocurrencies and new ways of trading and new types of speculation and so forth, maybe, we didn't know for sure, but maybe this technology, the underpinning ideas could be relevant to some of the biggest problems, again, back then, the biggest problems in finance. And maybe just to give a taste of why we believed that, if you look at how the cryptocurrencies, the public blockchain platforms work, they have this really strange property that multiple different people across the internet are able to trade with each other, transact, come to consensus about which trades have been done, who owns which currencies and things like that. And what we realized was that these systems that were designed to operate without any central identified controlling party had a really unusual and quite interesting architecture, at least interesting and unusual to me as a software engineer, because you had all these different people running software that they controlled, and yet was somehow, like almost magically, of course it wasn't magic, but it seemed it at the time, almost magically being completely in sync with all these other people who they wanted to trade with but didn't fully trust. Long story short, there was this idea in our head that said, well, isn't that a problem that every business has? You buy something from somebody else, you invoice them, and there's always these disputes and inconsistencies. I think you owe me some money, you're not quite sure it's right. Maybe 5 participants are in a consortium and they all see different aspects of a piece of information, but they should all see the same thing. What if we could somehow harness this technology to bring everybody in a market, regular, normal business markets, finance, insurance, trade finance, whatever it might be, bring them into consensus about the deals and facts they care about. And back in 2015, we started with banking because we thought that's where the biggest problem was. And we worked through this collaborative process to figure out, could that problem be solved? Could that technology be applied to those issues? And if so, how might we do it? And from that work was born Corda. And once we realized that we were onto something, we realized that Corda was the heart of the firm. And then we sort of like pivoted, if you like, to become nothing but a software firm whose core product is this Corda blockchain platform.
Okay, interesting. So in terms of the actual technology itself, we hear a lot about how sort of blockchain and DLT are used quite interchangeably as terms. Could you give me your view of what the definitions are and really how DLT is specific to this scenario?
Yes, so I must admit I got into some trouble for this a few years ago because like I say, I'm an engineer, so I kind of crave and enjoy precision and semantics and getting these getting these words right. And what I discovered was as you take the world of precision and precise definitions, you take it into the world of business, commerce, and I guess marketing. Given the audience here, suddenly those two universes they collide, and only one side comes out on top. And the reason why we started using these terms was we wanted people to realize that there were really 2 parallel revolutions going on. There's the one I talked about earlier, this amazing sort of like this exuberant new world from the last 10, 11 years of new virtual currencies and cryptocurrencies and trading and the new decentralized economy that's enabling. And that's often thought of as, as public blockchain or just blockchain. And then there was this new revolution that we at R3 and some of our peer firms were driving, which was how do we apply the underlying technology to revolutionize existing industries to transform the economics and behaviors of entire markets, making supply chain finance work better, making trade finance work better, reinsurance. How do we effect change at the level of a market rather than just for individual firms? So for a period of time, we sought a different word to distinguish the two things, and DLT was often used. But what we discovered was the market is ultimately what dominates, and the word blockchain has come to be used for both. And then you then have to disambiguate to say, are you working with virtual currencies, or are you solving problems and trying to optimize the operations of entire markets? And so I quite freely use the word blockchain for both, because as much as I might like to distinguish between them sort of precisely and with specific definitions, it was a losing battle, and I lost that one. So I just use blockchain now. I've completely capitulated.
Yeah, fair enough. But I guess in this instance, sort of blockchain as an open source product, sort of DLT seen as a bit more specific for the companies involved. They don't want to share. So how does it operate to our world of crypto versus this solution for the marketing industry? Could you kind of give me a sense of the sort of strengths of R3 and how it can support the marketing industry?
Yes, so we think about. So I made the argument, and this argument is one I've made so far in this discussion without evidence. So I'll try and dig into it a little deeper now. But I made this argument that the technology that underpins these exciting cryptocurrency and virtual currency markets is also relevant in part to problems affecting the entire marketing industry or the entire advertising industry or other industries entirely. So why do I believe that? Well, the key thing that unifies all these different approaches is we believe wherever there are two or more parties who should be synchronized, they should be in consensus about some data. In business, they invariably are not. So as I gave a very quick example earlier, perhaps maybe my advertising agency sends me an invoice, I receive it. Do I pay the right amount? Do I agree with them that was the right amount? It's quite often the case that two parties, a buyer and a seller, a customer and a supplier, maybe an entire group of firms who are transacting for some purpose, they should simply be in sync. There should be a shared source of truth, a shared set of data that they can all operate on for any given scenario. And that's what the public cryptocurrencies and the public blockchains gave us. But the one thing they have, which is just not appropriate for us and in the business realm, and why we invented Corda, was in the public blockchains, the public cryptocurrencies, they work on the basis that everybody sees everything, everybody processes every transaction, everything is visible to everybody. Now that's how those systems have to work. You go through the security analysis and the engineering, and the solution drops out. The people who built those systems are far from mad. They're far from stupid. They're some of the cleverest people in the world, and that was the right engineering solution for their problem. But if you look over in the world of business and in the world of marketing, if a client has engaged a marketing firm, or the marketing firm is sending out an RFP to various suppliers that they use or whatever it is, for that particular deal, for that particular RFP, for that particular engagement, there are only certain organizations who should see that data. We need to know who they are. We need to know what they can do with it. We need to agree who can update it, who can merely observe it. And it will differ on a per deal, per trade, per engagement basis. So you need to be able to apply that same idea of bringing people who should be in sync about various facts into sync, but only those people who need to be in sync. And it will be different for every deal, trade, or any other engagement. So the key distinction for me between the public blockchains and what we're building with Corda is that idea of identity. You know with whom you're sharing your data, you know why you're sharing it with them, and you only share it with those who have a need to know. But you're sharing it for a particular and important reason, which is you want them to have it, and you want to know that you're all in sync, so that you get rid of all these endless problems and costly delays caused by different people having different views of what should simply be the same data.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting that it's sort of breaking out of the financial services world. Have you got some other examples of industries that have adopted blockchain to great effect?
Yes, so you're right. We began in financial services, in fact, quite narrowly, just with large investment banks, and it was the insurance industry that first tipped us off to the possibility that we were onto something. Because back in 2015 and 16, my team was working with all these banks at the time to design Corda, and then almost out of nowhere, and I should say that the code we built, Corda, is open source. And just a definitional point, in this sense, I mean open source as in people can look at the code to check how it works, and if they don't like how it works, they can change it for their own benefit. So it's about access to the underlying computer code. And because of that, people we weren't engaged with discovered it. And it was the insurance industry who realized that it could be useful to them. Because think about even just like the simplest case, of even in the first insurers to use it were reinsurers. But even in the retail case, you can see the need. You imagine you go to a high street insurance broker. Many people still do. What does that insurance broker do after you've given your details for maybe for your property insurance, your house insurance? They need to send that information to a panel of different insurers to get quotes back. There is just a perfect example of where a single piece of information, the policy details you'd like to buy, needs to be syndicated out to multiple insurers. They need to be able to decide whether they want to quote, and then the quotes come back. You select one, and then the policy is created, and off you go. A perfect example of where multiple firms should be in sync about something, and where the policyholder, the broker, the ultimate insurer, and then the reinsurer down the line are all in sync. So the insurance industry realized Corda was a good fit. And then it kind of went nuts in 2017 and 18. The supply chain industry and the trade finance industry, which is adjacent to banking but slightly different, realized they had the same requirement. And then government. So in various countries, people realized that land registries and the property purchasing process was also prime for this. You just think, I'm recording this in the UK, as many of the viewers of this will be. Just think about how many people are involved in buying a house. There's the estate agent, there's the mortgage broker, there's the mortgage company themselves, there's the conveyancers, maybe other solicitors, surveyors, all these different participants who have to coordinate and be part of this process. But there's nobody except perhaps the house buyer who's coordinating it all. They've all got their own systems, and it's just so slow and inefficient, and the land registry as well. If only you could somehow help coordinate and keep these people in sync, but critically, and this is really important for success, without actively trying to disintermediate or destroy the business of someone who's involved in this. This is all about creating new opportunity and doing things more efficiently. But you need the participation and the cooperation of everybody who's involved. So you have to think very carefully about what's the win for everybody. And in situations where there is one, the technology is a good fit. So we're seeing applications in multiple industries.
Right. It's obviously a complex piece of technology. What are the challenges for implementation for people who want to participate?
So there's the obvious technical challenges. We should be transparent about this. Enterprise blockchain, which is the phrase I use to disambiguate from the public cryptocurrencies. Enterprise blockchains like Corda, they are relatively new. Corda's been around for 3 or 4 years, but technology often takes longer than that to fully mature. So there's the need for people to go into these projects with their eyes open. That the technology is rapidly maturing, but it's still on that growth phase. And it would be ridiculous to pretend that we're not the case. But it's gratifying to see how many large projects are live and successfully so. So although the technology is clearly a component of this, I don't see it as the major risk. Where I think it's most important to focus to ensure success is related to the previous point I made, which is if you think about the commercial and I guess the commercial dynamics that are at play. This is all about trying to improve how entire markets operate, how firms in a market can transact with each other with ease and more effectively. So there are multiple firms who have to be coordinated. Now, of course, that can be more complicated because doing things with multiple parties is harder than doing them with one. But of course, there are two flip sides to that. One is the advantages, and so the benefits can be significantly higher because you can transform a whole market. Yeah. But the real key to it is identifying the incentive structure, because if you identify, like in the house building process, what the win is for everybody. So if I'm the, to go back to the house buying process, I'm the mortgage broker. If I install this software, if I make this change, how does that benefit me and my customers? Can I make more money? Can I write more policies, write more mortgages? And if you take that, it's nothing to do with technology, but you do that analysis. What are the incentives at play? What's the win and what would be the loss for each of these participants? Have we addressed it? Have we identified what would cause them to see value in this? And if you can say yes for every single participant, then it's kind of self-propagating and self-fulfilling at that point, because everybody has an incentive to make it happen. Where I saw one or two projects stall in the early days was that people came sometimes into these projects with perhaps a sort of almost like a missionary zeal to disintermediate someone. We hate the middlemen, those kinds of things, not realizing that middlemen exist. It's not a pejorative term. They exist because they match people, they add value, they exist in the market for a purpose, or else they wouldn't exist. And trying naively to apply some sort of COD economics to a market that has existed for years and exists for a particular purpose, is a hiding to nothing. These market structures are complex, rich, and sort of like deeply ingrained. Working with them to improve collectively is so much more successful than thinking you can just tear everything up and that somehow better than these people who've been working in this industry for decades.
Yeah. And then to finish up, if we look forward, what's the future for the technology? Where are we going with all of this?
So if I think about what my vision is, the problem that I thought we were trying to solve with Corda, we have what we call a white paper that is almost like a manifesto, and the first few sentences read something like, we envisage a future where any firm can transact with any other for any purpose without friction, delays, or costly reconciliations. It's a world where business just flows more freely, almost where IT does what it's supposed to do, gets out of the way and just works, rather than constantly having to be sort of like, poked with a stick or given a kick because things don't quite mesh together properly. And the idea of that vision is when firms can transact directly and efficiently, so much more becomes possible. Imagine if payments were available on these networks. So not only can you record contracts and manage the business with your peers, but then the payments flow automatically when approved, so that money received in one context can then be immediately reused, and it's not stuck in the payment system and things like that. So it's a world of just so much more efficient commerce, so that business people can focus on growing their businesses and serving their customers and almost benefiting from IT, rather than it just constantly getting in the way.
Excellent. Really fascinating, Richard. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you again.
Thanks so much for having me.